State Assemblyman Anthony Brindisi, good morning.
Good morning, Jeff. How are you?
Good. So a budget deal comes together over the weekend. We'll get into some of the details. There's a couple of things I want to ask you about, but your reaction and what you like and don't like in the budget.
Well, I think like any budget, certainly there's things you're going to like, there's things you're not going to like, but that's what compromise is all about. And at the end of the day, I think there's a number of things that are in the state budget that we can be happy about. You know, you talk about the education piece, which is always very important to me, and I know many residents in the area who care about public education. We're seeing a very substantial amount of money going into the foundation aid formula, which helps the districts that are in this area, especially places like Utica. And we're going to see, hopefully, we are going to see increased funding for all those schools. And for example, Utica is not going to see any layoffs or cuts in programs because of the nice increase in funding that they got for the foundation aid. Other things that I think are great, obviously, in the grand scheme of things, it's probably not as important as education or healthcare, but being able to have ride sharing now in upstate New York to allow apps like Uber and Lyft to operate outside of New York City, I think is a really big deal for us, especially in places like Utica, where we don't have the greatest public transportation options. We have some more options now with Uber and Lyft coming on board. And then there's other things in there, you know, tax cuts for middle-class workers, workers' compensation reform, which is something we hear about often from small businesses as one of the things that really drives up costs, or their workers' compensation insurance. So we're seeing some reforms to that. So overall, I think it's a good budget. Obviously, there's not everything in there that I'd like to see, and some things I don't want to see, but that's what compromise is all about.
You mentioned schools. We'll talk about that for a minute. Obviously, great news that an increase in funding means that high-needs districts like Utica won't have to, you mentioned Utica not having to go through the layoff process this year. Obviously, that's a good news. Is that increase in funding for this year only, or is there more to come in the years ahead? So Utica's not in that situation where they're laying off dozens of teachers.
Well, it's for this year only. Obviously, if we look at the last 5 years, Utica's had increases where they have not had to lay off. Now they're still trying to make up for the layoffs that they had from 2010 and 2011, but in the last few years, they've seen some increases, which have helped them prevent some layoffs, actually bring some teachers back to help lower class sizes. And hopefully going forward, as long as we can stay committed to the foundation aid, we are going to see more increases for area school districts. The big battle that we had this year, and which is starting to creep up more and more, is these charter school debate. And I say it all the time, I'm not opposed to charter schools. What I am opposed to is having them funded by underfunded school districts like Utica. There has to be a separate mechanism to fund these kinds of schools, because Utica's spending $3, $4, and I think next year it's $5 million a year to fund the charter school, and they can't just close a school to make up for that cost. These kids come from all over the city of Utica, so it's not like you can collapse one school building and save some costs, because they're coming from all over. So the governor at the last minute really hammered into those charter schools. He wanted more funding for charter schools, which he ended up getting some of that in the budget. But this is a big debate that's going to be going forward over the next few years in New York State. We have to make a decision what's more important, the 92% public education students, or are we going to put the funding towards the 8% of kids that go to charter schools, which, again, I'm not opposed to parents sending their kids to charter schools, but we have to make sure that we're not doing it on the backs of schools like Utica, which are already struggling to meet the costs.
Absolutely. There was a lot of talk leading up to, through the negotiation process, about free tuition, who was going to pay for it. I see there is free tuition for, I guess, what's being called income-eligible families for SUNY schools. Can you elaborate on that?
So this was a big priority of the governor's. I had some reservations about it. There's nothing is free in life. Obviously, someone's paying for it. But in the end, the governor got pretty much what he wanted in his college tuition proposal for families earning under $100,000. Their children would be eligible for free tuition at SUNY schools or CUNY schools in the city of New York. In the end, we tried to water this down a little bit and make sure that we're still giving higher tuition assistance grants, increasing the funding in the tuition assistance program, so students are eligible for more tuition assistance if they attend a SUNY school or a private university. So he did get a lot of what he wanted. This was one of his big priorities going into the budget. And, despite trying to make some changes, we're going to see some element of free tuition going forward in this year's budget.
Do you know what the level is at, the income level? Who would be eligible?
Right now, it's for families earning under $125,000 a year. It's phased in over a period of I think 3 years. The way it works, so it's not an immediate thing that's going to happen. It's going to happen over the course of 3 years and move forward from there.
And Uber included in the budget. I know you were a supporter of this throughout the process. Talk about what happens now with the ride-sharing services.
So right now, because it was passed in the budget, and I believe the Senate voted on it last night, 90 days from now, the law will become effective, and companies like Uber and Lyft will be able to start operating in upstate areas. So for those who are not familiar with these applications, it's just the app you download on your phone if you want to get a ride. It's a very effective way of transportation, especially in urban areas. So you see in places like New York City or other cities that have this.
Sure.
You see more transportation options. It's good for business travelers. It actually helps provide jobs. People who want to get a second income or a part-time job can become Uber or Lyft drivers. Students use it a lot, especially going out on the town at night. You certainly don't want people out driving in their cars after they had a night of drinking. So these are very popular among millennials who use them to get home after a night of drinking. Helps cut down on drunk driving. That's why you saw groups like Mothers Against Drunk Driving come out in favor of Uber and Lyft in upstate New York. So I'm very happy it's finally moving forward. We definitely need it in this area, but we do have a lack of transportation options, so we're going to see that moving forward.
Anthony, one of the questions that we had discussed in talking about this was the real possibility that the counties would be able to opt out, and it looks like that was what was passed. How would that be a situation where if Oneida County, you were getting a ride and you needed to ride to Herkimer County and Herkimer decided to opt out? I mean, can you explain, basically what the parameters are for the law and how it would affect each county?
Sure. So it's part of the final compromise. Initially, what people who were against Uber wanted was they wanted any municipality to be able to regulate Uber. So any town, city, village, county could operate and pass regulations for this industry instead of a statewide network of regulation. So imagine driving from the village of Whitesboro, who doesn't regulate Uber, into the village of Yorkville that doesn't want Uber. It would just be a bureaucratic nightmare. So we're able to get rid of that and say that for this law, if a county wanted to opt out of allowing ride sharing into their county, they could do that. So I guess moving forward, if Oneida County was not opting out and Herkimer County decided to opt out, Uber cannot transport into Herkimer County. I don't foresee that happening. I can't see these counties wanting to opt out. I think if you look at the public opinion polls, close to 90% of people in upstate New York want this technology. They want ride sharing. So it would be an incredibly unpopular decision by any county legislature to say they want to not allow ride sharing in their county. But that was sort of the compromise that was done in the end, and I think that you're going to see most of the counties in our region want Uber and not opt out of it because they'll see a pretty big outcry from residents in their jurisdiction.
Were the background checks a part of this? I know people were calling for background checks and fingerprints and everything. What precautions were put in for Uber drivers?
The background checks are a part of this, so drivers who want to be employed by Uber or Lyft have to go through a series of background checks. That was a compromise that was made. Fingerprinting is not a part of it, but background checks are a part of it, so you're making sure that people who are operating these vehicles have a safe record and not transporting people around who have criminal history, perhaps.
All right, and then the last thing on Uber. So if a county wants Uber, they don't have to take action?
It's automatic. The only thing a county would have to do is opt out of it.
Okay. All right, State Assemblyman Anthony Brindisi. I know it's been probably a hectic weekend. Thanks for spending some time with us this morning.
All right, thank you, guys.
All right, well, $153 billion budget passed by the state legislature over the weekend, agreement Friday, and then they were taking action on it on Saturday and Sunday, the Assembly and the Senate.